Welcome to StantonMD. I'm board certified emergency physician Dr. Ryan Stanton, and we're here today on a steamy fall day at the Lexington Fire Department Training Center. We're going to learn all about what goes into keeping these gentlemen safe.
We begin our show today with child safety and what the Lexington Fire Department is doing to help protect our youngest family members.
One of the most important things we can do for young children is making sure they are properly restrained in the car seat. Trauma is the #1 cause of death for children, and 1 in 4 of those deaths is associated with a car accident. Over 600 deaths per year. Even though we've had those numbers drop down over the last couple of decades, the numbers are still there. Now, the thing we have in our favor for these children are these car seats. Think of these basically like the car seats that you see in motor racing, such as NASCAR. These things help to protect them, surround them, keep them in place. The issue with trauma is movement. The shear forces associated with our deceleration and the tissue deceleration with relation to the car being stopped or moved. What we want to do is basically make this child one with the car, making sure that all the energy is absorbed by the car and the car seat, not by the child and their tissues. So the key being, 1, get professional help, especially with that first child. Second, you want to make sure that you read all of the directions. There's plenty of warnings all over this seat, and they will help guide you to make sure that you do the right things for your children. Whether it's the sign that says where to keep the belts, the level on that other side that lets you know if the seat is angled properly, the weight limits, which is very important because that does change a little bit with every car seat, making sure that you realize you need to make sure you have the right seat at the right angle in the right position based on your child's size, weight, and age. Now, the most important thing we need to remember, and this is something that's relatively new, that we want to leave children rearward facing as long as possible. Even if they're longer with their knees kind of tucked up because of the back of the seat, you want to leave them facing backwards. This is much safer. In fact, it would be safer for all of us to be riding backwards than it would forwards because of the absorption of the trauma on a larger body surface area. Unfortunately, the children are the ones that get the nicest and safest seats for traveling, and if we do it correctly, it significantly decreases that risk of death and serious injury. So make sure you take the proper steps to keep your child safe when traveling around in the car.
Well, the hope is that as far as accidents and traumas, that we see, less injuries. I mean, that's our goal in this education program, is to be able to show people the proper way to install them, and also, give them hopefully an impactful statement to where they'll use it properly and reduce those injuries down the road. I mean, I've got 3 boys myself, under 8. They're all in car seats, so it hits home with me when I see a child that's not properly restrained. I want to stop that person right there and say, hey, let me fix this and show you how to do it properly, because it's just it's proven that in real world situations, riding the ambulance for 10 years like I did, I saw so many vehicle accidents to where the passengers of the vehicle were injured, had some significant traumatic injuries. But if a child was restrained properly in their seat, a lot of times they would not either have no injuries at all or very, very little, and they would be just fine coming out of a bad car accident. All right, so some of the first things we want to do when the owner comes in, we want to ask them for their owner's manual of their car. The reason we do that is because we're able to take a look at the car and the manufacturer's recommendations and actually see what the car will do as far as where the seat positions are, weight limits and things like that on the lower anchors and the upper tethers. Things that only the car seat manual will be able, or the actual seat manual in the car would be able to tell us. Next thing we do is we take a quick look at the car seat manual itself, and we'll look at just everything that goes into installing this seat and how to properly do it. And then finally, what we'll do is we'll take a look at it and make sure there's no recalls on the seat itself. If there's recalls on the seat, then we'll have to make recommendations to the owner of what they can do after that. But as you can see here, when I first took a look at this seat, you can see that there are several misuses here. And what we'll do is we'll describe it to her what exactly has happened, so they can have a better understanding when they go to install this seat again what exactly is wrong. With this seat in particular, once I get the seat itself out, we'll be able to take a better look at the the setup here. Okay, so we got the seat itself out. We'll come back to that. This is a infant carrier with a base, and what we're taking a look at here is the base itself. And this base, first off, we've got too much movement. You never want more than 1 inch of movement on the belt path. And right now when I move this, you've got more than 1 inch of movement on the belt path. There's multiple ways to actually install this seat. Currently they've got it installed with the seat belt and also the lower anchors as well. When a child is small, I recommend to go ahead, if the lower anchors are available, it's best practice to use those lower anchors. And what we'll do is we'll unhook the seat belt itself, because you no longer need it. And now what you're going to do is you're going to use these lower anchors. I'm going to unhook it so you can see what I'm talking about. The seat itself, this car is designed, it's got lower anchors built into the seat itself, so you do not have to use the seat belt per se, as long as you're within the weight limit parameters. And like I said, in the owner's manuals, you can refer to the actual owner's manuals of the car and also the seat itself to get those recommendations. But being this is a new child, I know that we're good, so we're going to use the lower anchors. The first thing I want to do is locate. There's a button here that shows me the lower anchors, and I want to fix one of the lower anchors on this side to that side. Same thing on the opposite side. Sometimes they can be a little bit tricky to get to, so you have to. All right, so we're attached on both sides. The next thing is probably your most important step. This is the only way you're going to be able to achieve the no more than 1 inch movement at the belt path. And what you have to essentially do is you've got to put some direct pressure onto this seat. And what that does, any slack that's in there, it's going to loosen up and enable you to be able to pull it tight. So you're going to put some direct pressure onto this, and then you're going to pull any slack you have out on both sides or one side, depending on where the and sometimes you even have to get in there and maybe put your knee on it as well. But now you can see there is movement up and down. That's perfectly fine. What we're looking for is your belt path. Your belt path is right here. You want no more than 1 inch left to right, and you have very little movement left to right in this seat. So you know at this time that is in there good. If you can see on here, right here, it's showing that if there is the red in the middle is showing, then it's going to be incorrect. And this one actually is you've got very little red showing, but it's in there. The angle on it's going to be fine. If you had to adjust that, the way you would do that is you would have to actually take the seat out itself, take the base out, and there is a angle adjuster on the bottom of this seat. You just simply turn it and it would actually bring the angle either down, or you could take it out and it would bring the angle up. When they're rear facing, you're going to want the actual straps or the harness to be at or below the child's shoulder. And when you place the child in, you would want to make sure the chest plate right here is right at the center of their chest, and you do a pinch test to make sure you don't want to be able to grab any webbing whatsoever. And we'll go over with the caregiver exactly what we mean by that. We'll show them how to do the pinch test to make sure there's no extra webbing. You want them good and snug in there, and you want the shoulder straps at or below their shoulders. We also tell them make sure they don't use any large clothing, any coats or bulky clothing when they put them in here. That gives a gap to where if they had an impact, potentially they could come out of their harness itself.
The choice of preference in terms of seat belt placement or car seat placement for children is first in this middle seat. This is the farthest distance from anything big and heavy and nasty that's going to hit the car, so the most room for movement without the child being involved. The next preference is going to be that back right seat. This one also has a decreased risk of impact. A lot of the head-on or major impacts are on the driver's side. And then finally, this back left seat, the back behind the driver's seat, is going to be our third choice. Now, one of the big things to remember is never the front seats, especially with modern airbags. These can be dangerous, if not deadly, for children. The children need to stay in the back seats, and I know this can be difficult when a lot of kids want to be up there with mom and dad, and I see it all the time with kids up in the front, seatbelt or not. That can be extremely dangerous, so we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of these back seats when it comes to securing our children. Firefighter Branham talks about the importance of the clothing that your child's wearing, and I know as we get into winter and colder weather, we want to bundle up those little ones to keep them warm, but you want to make sure that they are not without any of those puffy coats. This promotes movement of the body in case of a car accident, which increases risk of trauma and injury. So you want to make sure that those belts are sitting right against that lowest layer of clothing that they have and not under a puffy coat. Take off that puffy coat, take off anything that makes a gap in between the seat belts and the child before you put them in the seat. Then when you get them out, once you've reached your destination, you can bundle them back up for the time outside the car.
The preference on an infant is going to be in the middle. And the reason I say that is because you've got more zones on either side of the car to be able to, if you had a side impact on this side or that side, there's more room, for that child to not be injured. We do it based on, we'll give you that recommendation, but if sometimes it's the parent wants them on either side, that way they can reach them, but it is best practice to put them in the middle if possible. If it's in the middle, it gives you this much more space. If you were to have a side impact, you've got a lot more room built in to keep them safe. So basically now what we've got is the same thing you had with this. It's just a belt going across there like that. And I'm going to plug it into here. And this is where you get you got to just put your weight down on it the best you can right here. Just like so. And you want to pull out all your extra slack. And now it's switched over on your retractor. So I'm just going to pull, try to get every bit of extra slack out that I can. And then it's in there good and tight. I'm going to take my seat again. You're in there, and when you test it, you grab right here, and if you can't, you shouldn't be able to move any more than an inch, which that one's really not moving at all.
Now you want to make sure that you know all the details of your car, because every car is different as well. Where these anchors take place in the car, whether they're on each side or in the base, and some cars even only have one on one side or the other. Also, the anchors in the top for the forward-facing seats to keep them from rocking forward. Make sure you know those details, and if all else fails, check out your local fire department to get those information and instruction on how to properly do it.
Well, what we have today is this seat itself is called a belt positioning booster seat. The belt positioning booster seat, what it's designed to do is essentially when you have a child that's in a booster seat itself, the biggest thing is the position of the belt. If your child meets the weight requirements of a booster seat, and you're going to put them in a booster seat, the most important thing you can do is make sure the belt path is traveling across the stronger points of contact on the body. And that's what these seats are designed to do. They're not necessarily fixed to the car themselves like a car seat, like a rear-facing car seat or a convertible car seat would be. What it's designed to do is essentially make sure your belt path travels across the appropriate parts of a smaller child's body. When we sit in a seat and we put the seat belt on, it typically travels right across our shoulder, down, and the lap belt goes across the waist. And what we don't want to happen is if a child is in that seat, typically it'll be up around their neck, and it could also be across their abdomen, and if they're not in a booster seat themselves. So what we want to make sure they do is if they're in these booster seats, it's going to raise them up several inches, which will make that belt path travel across the waist and also across the point of contacts that we want it to be with the top strap itself. So the biggest emphasis on using a booster seat is to go back to your owner's manual of your car seat and just make sure that they fit within the parameters of this seat itself, and make sure their head is not above the actual seat. This particular one, the head will actually, the top of the car seat where the head's going to be will actually raise up, and they'll be able to use it for longer. So the longer we can have them in a booster seat, once they're beyond the weight limits of the convertible or the seat that you had them in prior in the forward-facing position, We want them to stay in that. So the seat belt, even once they're weighted out of it, the seat belt, we want it traveling across the strongest parts of the body so they can absorb the impact and not be in an area which would cause more harm.
So firefighter Branham did a great job describing how this seat works. It actually works as a transition. As we move up, the child gets larger ways to take advantage of making sure the belts are the best possible at restraining the child, but also decreasing the risk of inadvertent injuries from these seat belts associated from the child being slightly too small for the traditional placement of these shoulder and lap harnesses. Now, for all of us, adults included, especially pregnant females, belt positioning is key. We want to make sure that the belts are going across the bony prominences of the body, so over the clavicles, on your left shoulder or right shoulder if you're in the passenger seat, and as low across the abdomen into the pelvis as possible, across the two bones there that you would traditionally call the hip bone or iliac crest. These bones help restrain the driver, because what we find with a lot of serious injuries from car seat belts is the soft tissues, especially with the abdomen trying to shear across as the car stops. So making sure that you have that belt across the shoulder, not the neck, the soft tissues of the neck, and the lap belt across as low as you can get down on the top of the hips and legs. And making sure with a child that this is attached as well. This is what helps the child. It keeps the belt low because it tends to ride up on children, and also prevents them from sliding out under in car accidents, because that's one thing we see as well with car seats, especially if they're reclined, is people will actually shear out or come out from under the car seat belt, resulting in significant trauma, especially to the extremities. So we want to make sure we do everything, and again, just like the other car seat, make sure you read the instructions, the weight limits, the height limits, and set this up just right. If you have any questions, check out your local fire department and they can help you out. Much appreciation to firefighter paramedic Kyle Branham and all the work they're doing here in Lexington to make sure that our children are staying safe. And we want to do everything we can to make sure that our children and young people are as safe as possible with what is the most dangerous thing that we do on a daily basis, and that's drive around in our cars and trucks. So we want to make sure that they're properly restrained. And if you have any questions about how to make sure that it's properly done or getting some education, check in with your local fire department. They can have folks that can educate you. My wife and I did it with our first child, and it was invaluable information that's helped keep our children safe as well.